Hey, it's Kevin Rich here. Welcome back to the Mixing in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about limiting. So firstly, if you're new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So limiting. Limiting in its simplest form is a compressor that has a very high ratio, can be a very fast attack, can be a very fast release as well, and it's designed to, basically stop the audio in its tracks above a certain level. I mean, that's generally what a brick wall limiter is, right? So there's different types of limiters. Some are very extreme, like a brick wall limiter. Limiting is done more in the mastering stage, but there are places to do it in a mix, and it is not unheard of to use it in mixing. But as I said, it's fundamentally a very extreme compressor. It works very much the same. It sees a peak of audio come in and hit it, and it gets to a threshold, and it just either stops it dead or it pulls it down. It might let some pass depending on the type of limiter, but it will pull it down, and it will do it in a very high ratio, very extreme manner. So, as I said, a brick wall one, in theory, stops it dead. Now, it's not always stop dead. Some may get over, some may trickle past, that sort of stuff, but most audio will just hit this, and it could be called a ceiling or a threshold or whatever they call it, depending on the software you're using, the plugin, that sort of stuff. But that's what a limiter does, and you'll use it mostly to control the volume of a track that's very peaky. You want to reduce it even more, and let's say you're finding a compressor's not doing the job good enough for you and you really need to slam down on this thing, then maybe a limiter is what you need. So let's get into Cubase, and I'll show you a little bit more about it and discuss it a little bit more in detail. Okay, so here we are in Cubase, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few examples, right, and go through some of the controls, some of the ideas to do with the limiter. Now, I guess one of the most common places for a limiter is, say, on the mix bus, or it would be in mastering, okay? So, you get to mastering, you want to get the volume of your song up, you may put it on the main whole song, get that cranked up to be really loud. So we'll have a look at that first, right? So I've got a few different variances of plugins here. So we can start with some of Cubase's, right? So we've got one, it's just called Limiter. Now this one's a little bit sort of on the weird side in that it doesn't have the general controls that I think of when we talk about a limiter. This one here, it's all about this output and input, right? So we have a release though, so this is going to be how quickly the limiter lets go and stops limiting. All right, so we've got a song here, and there's no other limiter on here, so let's just bring this one in. All right, so we can see our signal here. Okay, now what I would do, now I've got the fader deliberately turned down low for a reason. So what you might want to do is, let's say we're pretending to master this song. I'm going to be conservative, and I'm going to say the word master, but it's not mastering, okay? But let's just say I'm going to master this or get this to a volume to hit -1 dB, right? Zero is our absolute limit. I want to leave a little bit of a buffer for any intersample peaks or anything like that, so we don't get distortion and all that sort of stuff, okay? So I'm going to do that. Now, we can see we've got no gain reduction happening at the moment. So the best that I can understand how to control this plugin is what we want to do is crank our input. And suddenly you can see we're getting gain reduction now. So we are definitely hitting -1, and that's what we're outputting. So I could keep pushing this So let's say your mix was quite low. Let's just pretend that by having it down this low. I mean, we could turn up a bit louder. All right, you can see this is your output here. We're not hitting -1. We want to hit -1. So we just crank the input up. Keep pushing, keep pushing. Suddenly we'll get to -1. All right, let's just clear that. Now, the general way to do this, it's fairly normal for, say, people to push, you know, maybe a gain reduction, -3 dB, something like that. It's fairly subtle, not too aggressive. It's going to keep your dynamic range fairly wide. You might think that that's not enough, you know, and look, that could be the case. So you might want to push it more. But as an example, if you push too hard, it's almost like you've lost volume, right? It's pretty rock solid on this -1, but we're reducing 23 dB and it's being crushed. So let's drop this down again. Now it's interesting how you can hear that spike happening. You can hear it waving in and out. So we could speed up the release. And now we're getting really bad distortion. We could slow it down. And those massive fluctuations in volume is probably not something you really want. So that's why you probably wouldn't look at crushing it too much. Because it's attempting to get rid of all of your dynamic range. And when you've got a song that you've deliberately put dynamic range in, then it's fighting against you. So with the slower release, it's not letting go so quickly. Now, if you have a faster release, it's going to let go a lot quicker. It's going to attempt to keep things more steady and rock solid there, but you will, as we heard, get some horrendous distortion. Anyway, so that is that plugin, okay, and that comes with Cubase, well, it comes with at least Cubase Pro. Now, the other option you've got with Cubase is this brick wall limiter, and this is supposed to be even more severe, right? It literally is a brick wall. So let's have a look at this one. So the controls here are very similar. We've got a release. Not sure what these link and DLCs, but they're not the major ones. So we're looking here straight away. Oh, it's defaulted to be -3. Okay, so let's push that up. -0.9, that's fine. So the difference with this one is that we can set the ceiling, but we don't have any way of impacting what's happening in. So really what you're reliant on with this brick wall limiter is that it's either there just for protection and you're not using it to technically increase the volume. You're using it there to make sure it doesn't peak over. But the other way to do it would be that you would have to basically adjust your volumes of, say, all your buses or your instruments, however you do it, to push it as hard as you want, right? So as an example, because we need to somehow increase the input if we want to get gain reduction. So to do that, I could just bring up the level. Okay, actually that's not working because we have another plugin before it. So because we have this plugin before it, I'm going to do that myself. So I'm going to actually push it. So you'll see our inputs now going into the red, and now we get our gain reduction. So you can hear this one massively distorted again. Now we can reduce some of the distortion by slowing the release down, or you could even go for an automatic release. Okay, but that's a lot of gain reduction. That is very squashed. All right, so let's get that back to normal. All right. So that's the brick wall limiter that comes with it. Now, some other ones that I like is the Ozone Maximizer. Now, this is pretty expensive, but this is great for using in mastering. It's got a lot of different settings. I'm not going to go through all of them all because, you know, this is not necessarily about the plugin. It's about the techniques. And here we have what I traditionally think of as more what we're looking for, a threshold and a ceiling. Right, and this true peak is to prevent, as it says, clipping in the analog domain. So any intersample peaks, it's meant to prevent that. So nothing can go above 0. We still may want to set our ceiling. So with a limiter, if I haven't already mentioned it, when we talk about a ceiling, this is what we're talking about is the upper limit of volume we want. 0 is your, let's say, true maximum. Most mastering engineers will at least go down to minus 0.3, but with some of the new standards for mastering for Apple Music and that, you might even go down to -1, and it just allows for those peaks. Now, again, we've got this true peak, so you shouldn't have to do this, but it just depends how you want to master, basically. And then what you do is you can adjust your threshold. So we can put the threshold at the same level. Right, so let's turn that on. That would be a good start. Right, this one here has a nice graphic to show you what it's actually doing. So at the moment you can see it's doing absolutely nothing. The signal is not going above the threshold. So it's like, basically it's like a compressor, okay? So it's not going to limit unless it goes above the threshold. As soon as it goes above the threshold, it will start limiting. So if we want to do some limiting, we need to push this down. Now you can see it flashes there a little bit, and you can see on the waveform here, just the tiny little peaks that it is now actually compressing. It is limiting, all right? Let's just say limiting. So that is where it's going over the threshold, and then it's letting go. Now we can push. All right, we can push this quite a lot. You can see how much it's compressing now. And you can see the dark gray is sort of like the before, and I think, and the inside gray is more what it's become. So it's a lot more squished, a lot more condensed. So again, you can hear those big volume increases. Between the parts where the guitar plays by itself and the parts where the drums and that come in, massive difference in volume, because it doesn't limit so much when the guitar just by itself. As soon as the drums and everything comes back in, it squashes it. And that's just because we are really over limiting this. It's not what we would do. If I was mastering this, I would be looking at, as I said, just a tiny bit, nothing too major. Just squashing some of these big peaks. We could go a little bit harder than that. And you want to sort of see what you get before and after. So that button there is just an automatic match, so we can bypass before and after to hear the difference in the actual sound quality as opposed to the volume. So, I don't hear too much of an impact there. If I turn that off, you can hear the difference in volume. So that's the volume increase that limiter is doing. So, that's a limiter that I like. There are other ones, like we can get vintage style limiters here. Okay, now that is really squashing it. Let's take that ceiling down. Okay, so this one here, we've got different styles. We've got an opto, we've got VCA, we've got different settings, soft and hard. We can change the attack, release, and with this one here, we'd probably be looking at pushing our input. And you can turn that down. So you could either balance it or you could just go straight for your volume increase there. Okay, so that's a few examples on the main output there. Now, the other thing you can do is you're not limited to just doing that with a limiter, right? So let's just do a quick example. Now, I've put the Ozone, this is a vintage limiter from Ozone, Isotope, and, got a few different settings here, but similar, ceiling and a threshold. Now, I've just put this on a snare. So let's say you got a snare that's very dynamic, right? So it's peaking on certain hits, the way the player does it. Right, so we can see what's happening there. So let's just say we want to set the ceiling there. So we might want to get our snare a little bit more solid. You can see what it's doing. So every time there's a hit, it's pulling down and then it's slowly releasing. Now the speed of the release here, because this is a vintage one, is going to be controlled more by the mode. So you can go for an analog, you can go for a modern. You'll see the modern there a lot quicker on the release. So you could use a limiter in this case, as I'm saying, to control that snare and to get it a lot tighter, a lot more consistent in the snare hits. And, you know, you can do the same thing with the compressor, but obviously this is a lot more, as I've indicated before, it's a lot more higher ratio. So it really is clamping down on those peaks. So it can be very good for getting those, like things like snare or something like that, to be a lot more solid and a lot more consistent with the hits if you've got very dynamic snare hits. Now, obviously it depends on the song, right? You need to use these with common sense and for a purpose, right? There's no point putting a limiter on everything just because you want everything to be squashed and rock solid. You know, sometimes you don't want that. You've got, you know, jazz drummers and stuff like that that are very dynamic and they want to be dynamic. You know, if you take that away, they'll be pretty upset. So there you go. That is it, limiting in Cubase Pro. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Do you use limiters in your mixes, or do you leave that mainly for mastering or anything else like that, and you mainly use compressors? Let me know. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. If I didn't explain something properly or you've got further questions, please put it in the comments. I read all the comments and I will answer as many of the comments and questions as I possibly can, as quickly as I can. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.